The final essay question of the 2014 AP English Language and Composition FRQs is the argument essay. And it's the one that, although the suggested time will always be 40 minutes, we might have 38 minutes or 37, depending on lost minutes here and there. If we read the prompt, it says authors Po Bronson and Ashley Merriman published The Creativity Crisis in Newsweek.com in July 2010. They reported that the Torrance test, a test of creativity that has been administered to millions of people worldwide in 50 languages, indicates that the public's creativity quotient has steadily crept downward since 1990. In their article, Bronson and Merriman cite the claim of Professor Kyung-Hee Kim at the College of William and Mary. It's very clear, and the decrease is very significant. Kim reports that it is the scores of younger children in America, from kindergarten through 6th grade, for whom the decline is most serious. Bronson and Merriman state that the potential consequences are sweeping. The necessity of human ingenuity is undisputed. A recent IBM poll of 1,500 CEOs identified creativity as the #1 leadership competency of the future. So I'm going to underline leadership competency. And I'm also going to underline necessity of human ingenuity. Yet it's not just about sustaining our nation's economic growth. That might be one point. All around us are matters of national and international importance that are crying out for creative solutions, from saving the Gulf of Mexico to bringing peace to Afghanistan to delivering healthcare. Such solutions emerge from a healthy marketplace of ideas, sustained by a populace constantly contributing original ideas and receptive to the ideas of others. Okay, so we want to look at the relationship between these two paragraphs that we're given. The first one is to tell us that our creativity quotient is going down. Okay, the decrease, especially among school-age kids. The second is to tell us all of the reasons why human ingenuity is necessary, not just leadership competency and economic growth, but international importance. So here's where we're going to get our actual task. One possible approach to this reputed decline in creativity is to explicitly teach creative thinking in school. Write to your school board explaining what you mean by creativity, and arguing for or against the creation of a class in creativity. So you're given a two-pronged prompt. You need to define creativity and then take a position. So let's just define creativity, take a position on a creativity class. That's what we have to do. So you take a moment, you process what you've read, you think about it, and then you're going to start jotting down some ideas. I know I'm a fan of creativity, so I'm going to take a position that, yes, we should have a class on creativity. And so I've got that, I've got my position, but now I need to define creativity. So how might I define it? There are a few different things I might think about. That creativity as a definition is working either together or independently to design applications, solutions, inquiries that go beyond the surface level. So let me just jot some notes down. Creativity, together or independent. We're going to write equals designing applications, solutions, inquiries that go beyond the surface. And something that I want to clarify in my definition is going to be that creativity is not making meaning. You might know where I'm going with this, but rather making something meaningful. So that's going to be what I'm thinking of in terms of my definition of creativity. So when I explain what I mean by creativity, I'm going to say that creativity involves learning to work either together or independently to design new applications, solutions, or inquiries that go beyond surface level solutions or surface level issues. Furthermore, creativity or furthermore, you know, it must be stressed that creativity is not making meaning, but rather making something meaningful. We already have the meaning, we've got the knowledge, we understand the skill, but how might we look at something differently? How might we solve something differently? And for this reason, my working thesis, creativity is the most important skill, I'll put for now, but I might revise that to ability, property, something like that, of mankind, and thus should be taught in schools. That's the idea I want. I personally like to borrow the verbiage of the prompt. So instead of should be taught in schools, thus deserves its own class in schools. I might do something like that so that I've got that word class, okay? So I've jotted down some ideas. I've brainstormed my definition of creativity. I've brainstormed a working thesis that can help me shape my ideas. Now I have to think, how would I go about, if I'm arguing for the creation of a class in creativity, what might be some reasons why we would have this class, or what might be the logistics of forming the class? So the first body paragraph I'm going to write about is going to be using creativity in conjunction with core classes. And I might talk about how it serves a bit as a study lab, how maybe each week you are combining creativity with a different core subject matter. I might demonstrate how you can have creative approaches. I might cite an anecdote. I've worked in the past with a math professor who, in teaching calculus, would have students actually use calculus to design and then create quilts. So I'm going to put calc quilt. That's pretty creative. Not too many people take calculus for quilting. So that's a way that we're going beyond the paper and pen solving of calculus equations and actually putting that into something and making it meaningful, okay? You could certainly do artistic interpretations of literature. That would be something, and the word artistic is so broad, you could narrow that down, but you've got a bunch of examples here of how you can use creativity in conjunction with core classes to make them more meaningful, okay? You might also talk about real world application. In the past, schools would sometimes do a field trip every once in a blue moon, but if you're going to use creativity in class, maybe rather than having to have the expense of going out on this really expensive trip, maybe you're able to find corporate volunteers who come into classrooms, who give demonstrations, who have hands-on activities for students to do. That's creativity. So a class in creativity could be that class. That might actually work and appeal to the school board. That's who we're writing to, because if you have that all in one class, you're not taking any time away from your core subjects. That's not to say your core subjects wouldn't be creative, but you see where we're going with that. For the body paragraph number 2. So we're still looking at why creativity, there should be a class on creativity. And what we're going to pursue here is that curriculum cannot remain constant. That's our next argument, and let's explain what I mean by this. Obviously, you're always going to have some iteration of math, of science, of English, literature, things like that. But the world changes, times change. So let's put that, times change, and as times change, so do problems, and so do solutions, okay? So it makes sense to develop a class on creativity where you could address ages-old problems and find new ways to solve them. This would be a great thing to do in terms of dealing with international problems. You could talk about global warming, recycling, the Great Pacific trash pile that's floating out in the ocean, right? I think it's bigger than Texas. That would be something that you could use. How do you solve these problems? I'm going to put Texas Pacific trash pile. It's just a note to myself. Obviously, folks, Texas is not floating in the Pacific. Please don't misunderstand that. Global warming. Or once again, any sort of medical outbreak. Maybe I'll use SARS as an example. Maybe I'll use the historic, 1918 flu that killed millions of people. Maybe I'll go way back to the medieval times and talk about the bubonic plague. You certainly have to change, okay? So there's some ideas I've jotted down for my second body paragraph. Now, in my, well, you could limit it to 2. And if you wanted to limit it to 2, then I would put a concession here. And especially because it's our last essay, you will likely only write 2 paragraphs. The concession, I'll write it over here. You could do a third body paragraph, but please watch your time. If you have only a few scant minutes remaining, add it to the body paragraph that's already there, rather than try to and fail to write a cohesive structure. But I think what we want to look at here, and I would certainly put the concession in with this first body paragraph. The concession is that a class with creativity, you wouldn't want it to be so structured that you lose the creativity. So I'm just going to write not dogmatic. It has to be a little bit free and open, but at the same time, it should still have a determined curriculum. And the curriculum might be global and environmental issues. Political unrest. Maybe it's a really broad topic, and maybe it becomes a sort of class that engenders discussion, which would enable a lot of the together from up here. And then it might not always be, it could go from a group discussion to a group project, or it can also be individual ideas that are then presented and a group project is developed. There's really a lot you could do with this. Here's the issue. Sometimes you get a prompt for the argument that either speaks to you, and as a student, this might really speak to you. You might feel really confident with what you know. The importance then is to narrow your scope. You have to really be smart about how you're planning the skeleton outline. You don't want to take long. What you don't want to do is end up, oh, I've got so much I can say about this, that you don't have cohesive body paragraphs, and that your essay therefore is not cohesive. It doesn't flow. It seems disjointed. You're listing instead of proving. You certainly want to make sure that you stay on target. So don't get overconfident and as such have an issue that would actually degrade the level of your writing. Okay, so once again, we've got our idea. We have to two-prong, define creativity and argue for or against it. So here I have my definition of creativity, my working thesis, and then my 2 body paragraphs. My concession are really, I would write it as a counter-argument rebuttal. I'm actually going to pair in my first body paragraph because it goes with that topic of using creativity in conjunction with core classes. Counter argument there would be, well, why don't you just put creativity into the core classes already? Why would you spend the money and the resources to open up a new class? And the point would be that it would detract from instructional time for the core classes, and it would give students more time and space to develop that creativity. That's the rebuttal. Okay, you've got the plan. You are ready to write. Good luck.